September the 11th, 1998. We're in Houston, Texas at the 12th Armored Division reunion. My name is Charla Henson, and today I am interviewing Richard Arthur Brock of the C Company 66. I appreciate you talking to us, and I want to start today with your parents, where they came from, full names, and your family, brothers and sisters.
All right. My father's name was Arthur Ira Brock, born in Lebanon, New Hampshire. My mother was Florence Lewis Brock, born in Columbus, Ohio. One brother, Roger, who is deceased. He smoked too much. So I am the loner in the family.
Okay.
As of now, I'm it.
Okay. Tell me what day you were born.
I was born April 9th, 1924. That put that date on the map, emblazoned in gold.
Okay, tell me about your education up to your, well, like your high school experience, what you were interested in, and then get me into where you got into the service.
Okay, I attended the public schools in Lancaster, New York. I attended after service technical school in two-year college in Buffalo, New York. During service, I attended Texas A&M, so I am a little bit Aggie, but unfortunately they closed the school down for ASDP for anybody that was, I understand, not in their last quarter. And that is a kind of a traumatic experience because we were put in two lines to determine where our assignment was going to be in the combat area. And as I got one man back from the interviewer, which was a second lieutenant, I heard him ask the boy in front of me, we were all boys, did he prefer to be engaged in indoor work, or did he prefer to be out in the fresh air? And the fellow said, "Sir, I would have preferred being inside." He said, "Tanks." And I thought to myself, Lord, I don't want to be in a tank. So I obviously took the other choice, and he said, "Armored infantry." So that was the very detailed exam we took to determine which part of the 12th Armored Division, which division, battalion, and so forth we were going to be assigned.
Now let's go back just a little bit. You went 2 years to the college. Okay. At what point did you enlist, or were you drafted?
My friends and neighbors sent me a letter saying that we in the United States government would appreciate it very much if you would report on such and such a date for physical exam for prior to induction in the United States Army.
And then, where was this at?
This was in Buffalo, New York. And once I graduated on one day and reported for induction the very next day at Camp Upton on Long Island. And stayed there for a very short period of time. My name appeared on the roster board to ship out. Went down to the train as told. They marched us all down, and it was an extremely long troop train. Just a whole bunch of cars, passenger cars. And we took off from Long Island, heading west in the United States. And there appeared to be no restrictions as to your movement on the train and so forth. So I had met a few fellows in the brief time I was at Camp Upton, and I'm walking back and forth between the cars to see if I can find any of these fellows. And every time they drop a car off, I was forward of that someplace. We got in El Paso, Texas, and there were 17 of us on the car. And the lieutenant said, "Line up by the truck," which we all did. And he said, "I'll call your name." I get in the truck. Called everybody's name, but I'm standing there. "You soldier, what's your name?" And I told him. He said, "You're not on the list." I said, "Well, I shipped out on the train with everybody else," and he took his clipboard and he's going through the sheets. And I was supposed to have gotten off in the middle of the country someplace. But he said, I don't know what to do with you. And he said, "Well, there's a new outfit being activated up on what they call the mountain." He said, "It's going to be the 575th Anti-Aircraft Battalion." I went up there wasn't a soul. There wasn't a soul there. The plywood barracks filled with sand and miserable. And I think it was a couple days. The cadre showed up, and all fellows that were born and raised in Texas. Really nice bunch of really nice fellows. Then about a week later, the bulk of the outfit showed up, and they were all from the boroughs of New York. Brooklyn, Queens, so forth and so on. And they found out rather quickly that they could really get the Texas cadre excited by only speaking in their native tongue, which was either Polish or Italian. All these fellows were, almost all of them to the man, were either Polish or Italian. And of course the cadre, and they had made me an acting corporal. I had been in the service, but hardly they made me an acting corporal. But anyway, this went on for a while, and we went right into our training of operating a half-track that either had 4 50 calibers on an electric turret or 2 50 calibers and a 37 in the middle. And we'd go down to Oro Grande, New Mexico, and a firing range, and we'd shoot at either a C-37, 47, is it, whatever it is, that pulls a sleeve. You shoot at the sleeve. You're supposed to shoot at the sleeve. Well, some of these fellas led the target too much, and they were just about shooting the tail off the airplane. And of course, they grabbed that guy and got him out of the turret. And we were gigged for a period. We couldn't go back on the firing range anymore. Next time we went down to the firing range, again, we had what they call an OQ plane. It's a radio-controlled plane that they go through all kinds of combat maneuvers with it and so forth. And once a bullet hits the plane, electronically a parachute opens and the plane comes down safely because they're a very expensive plane. Well, this fellow froze on it. He hit the plane, and he had those two handles with the triggers, and he just followed it all the way down to the ground, just blew it all to pieces. Well, that did it. We're gigged again. We couldn't go back on a firing range. That sort of behavior, plus the fact that these fellows wouldn't talk to you in English, they would use, as I said, their native tongue. I went to the company commander and I said, "Captain, this is really ridiculous." And I talked about it with him a little bit. I said, "I, if possible, would like a transfer." He said, "Well, give me a day or so and I'll get back to you," which he did. He said, "We're going to transfer you to the ASTP program." I said, "What's that?" And he told me. And I said, "Well, where am I going to go?" And he said, "Texas A&M." So I headed for Texas A&M, and unfortunately I contracted pneumonia, and they put me in a hospital right away. I'm just, a very young fella in the hospital, and I'm perspiring profusely. And this very nice young nurse, blonde, would come in all hours of the night and run her hand underneath me to see if, the bedclothes were moist, and if I were moist, it had to be changed. And I'd have to get up, and she'd have to change her clothes and change the bed linen. This went on for a number of days. And of course, I was very embarrassed. I just didn't like this. I found out where they had taken my clothes. And one night, in between one of these interruptions, I got my clothes, and I went back to college, and I knew where my room was, and went to my room. Nobody ever said a thing. Just like on a plane or a train, nobody ever said you shouldn't do that or one thing or another. But after Texas A&M, of course, I went with the 12th Armored Division. And part of the bodies that were being used to make the total division combat ready. And after our training at Camp Barclay, we shipped overseas on the Empress of Australia. And the general went through our area just prior to departure and found some cigarette butts in Company C area. So we were going to be punished. And we had to work in the kitchen the entire trip across the Atlantic. Well, actually, he didn't realize, but he did us a super favor, because I had access then to officers' food. So all the way over, we had plenty to eat, and ate very, very well, as a matter of fact. Ate officers' food on China and so forth. It was great. We landed in England and went up to Tidworth for further training prior to going across. Well, again, a stroke of real nice behavior. Supposedly General Patton took some of our tanks for another one of his divisions. Well, now we aren't combat ready. I believe, as I would have been told, whether this is true or not, I don't know, but because we were not combat ready, we were scratched from the invasion. In other words, we didn't go on the initial onslaught, which probably saved thousands of our lives. We went over shortly after that and progressed into Germany. And one of the first things that I just couldn't believe it. Our tanks are going ahead of us across the French landscape. We just gone through this one area, and a farmer comes running out, all agitated. He said, "You broke my fence. I want you to pay for my fence." And here we are liberating France, and this farmer is worried about his miserable fence. But we progressed on. And the first night assault that I can remember, we went through this little bombed out town, out in the darkness. We're going through an orchard, and all hell broke loose. Mortar fire and artillery fire. I apparently got knocked out by concussion. When I came to, looked around, the orchard's gone. I mean, there's stumps there and stuff like that, but the doggone orchard was completely gone. You had this acrid odor of burned powder in the air. I kind of timidly called the password. Dead silence. Not a sound.
What was the password?
I forget what it was, frankly.
And what was the purpose of the password? Just to contact
other members of your unit, so that you knew where they were and they knew where you were. And I tried this 3 times, and absolutely no answer. And it's still totally silent. Not a sound of anything. Well, I honestly didn't know what to do, because if I went forward as we were going, and the Germans hadn't retreated, or they're still out there, I'm in trouble. So I decided the best thing to do was to retrace my tracks back, because there would be somebody back there. And fortunately, everybody had retreated after the shelling, and they were in the bombed out little town that we had come through, hiding in the, holed up in the cellars of these bombed out buildings. And I also believe that was one of the first engagements where one of our officers had his head shot off. He fired a bazooka fellow fired a bazooka at the tank, and at that time we had a conical head on the bazooka, and if the bazooka did not hit the armor in a perpendicular fashion, it just ricocheted off. Well, you can imagine if you're in this big steel can and you beat on it with something, it's like ringing a bell. Well, when the shell ricocheted off, the turret just swung around and boom, gone. I didn't know what the lieutenant's name was or anything about it. I didn't see that happen. I was told after I got back. But then we progressed again.
Who was your captain? Who was your platoon leader?
Captain Fox was our company commander. Jerry Grigg was our first sergeant.
Okay, tell me something about Mr. Grigg.
Jerry was original Army. First sergeant, very strict. A lot of the fellows didn't understand that he was trying to instill upon all of us young boys what you had to do to survive. And he was just, in my opinion, a great person. Heavy set, not porky, but I mean, he's just a big man. Bushy eyebrows, but he's a very, very fine man. I just regret I would have liked to have talked to him again before he died.
Tell me, you mentioned before we started about the way he saw you and treated you men. Talk to us about that.
He was much our senior. And of course, we were young boys right out of school. And he would refer to us collectively as his boys. If he were talking to you on a one-to-one basis, he would say, son, remember you got to do this or whatever. And it was kind of sometimes in a gruff, what appeared to us to be a gruff voice. But he wanted to make a point. He wasn't there to make you love him, although I did. He wanted to get you to the point where you were a good soldier. That's about it. But we progressed on. Oftentimes we would go so far on a half-track, dismount and go on foot. Oftentimes we would, like I would, or more of us would get on the back of a tank. The tank would go in and we would ride the tank, or there were times when I would ride on the back of the tank manning the 50 caliber, and my men would be fanned out behind me, behind the tank.
Which tank battalion was that, or did you have?
There were different ones, and I don't know which.
You didn't travel with one.
It may have been the 43rd, because I'll talk about that a little bit later, how I got captured. It wasn't all terrifying, I guess I'd say. When we would hole up the game or ammunition and so forth and so on, or just wait until the next battle, we would find a home, a barn, some building to get the squad together. In a little town called Benestroff, there is a home, had the manure pile out in front, which many of them did, a little church across the street. It was 41 Grande Rue Strasse, Basse-Moselle, France. Never forget it. It just so happened that apparently that was the most affluent family in town before the Nazis came in. Their daughter, Manet, had her own car, which I guess was quite unusual for those days. Had showed me pictures of fur coat and so forth, so on, which of course is all gone, long gone. The only people in the town were quite elderly people, mostly elderly ladies and some elderly men, and young girls. And it was kind of odd. The girls were basically all about our age. So what I did, I got white bread from the kitchen and got the sea ration, I think it was beans and stuff like that, and opened them all up and put them in a pot and had the bread. And of course, they hadn't seen white bread for a long time. To them, that was cake. And we had a party in the kitchen where they ate. You had the wood stove over here, or used briquettes or wood, and then you had a big table in the other end of the room. A rather large room, kind of open space in between. We played what some might consider silly parlor games, blind man's bluff, spin the bottle, things like we used to do back in younger school days. And the Manet's parents were sitting at the kitchen table laughing. Oh my Lord, they thought that was the funniest thing I guess they had ever seen, because there was Manet was their daughter, and then there was Cecile, Tete, Annette, Yvonne. Well, there's a whole bunch of girls. Those are the names I remember. But they all came over. Manet invited them all over, and we had this party. A lot of fun. I was supposed to go back and have dinner with him about a week later, because Charles DeCall and his staff were going to come through and have dinner with him. I guess they would pick the family that had the place that could do this. But Captain Fox figured I wasn't in the service to be wandering around having dinner with people, so I never got back. However, I did go back prior to that and took Manet to a dentist in a town that was close by, where they had a dentist and a pedal dental machine and so forth. But once we left, well, of course, I've never been in contact with the people or anything like that. Another one of the things I kind of regret. I think it would have been kind of nice. There were times, like, I forget the name of the town. We went into the town, and I was on the back of the tank, and the men were spread out behind me. And we came to this intersection, city street intersection, and it is maybe 4 times as far as I am from the corner of the room. A German popped up out of a hole with a bazooka and fired it point blank at us. I guess he must have been awful nervous. He missed the tank, hit my pant legs, and of course it scared the living daylights out of me, but the tank commander saw him, and it was a big hole with nobody in it. After the first round, they removed the problem. Another time, we were on the reverse slope, winter time. My feet were starting to freeze, so they took me back in a truck and let me out in the street just down from headquarters. And I got out, reached in my pocket, field jacket pocket, and pulled out a grenade, which I knew was there, but the only thing I didn't know was that the pin wasn't in it. And fortunately, being in there tight, the handle had, was down tight. And I asked him, oh my God, what am I going to do with this? And there was a building on the other side of the street, just at night. Of course, all the windows are gone, everything like this, totally black in there. And I hollered, anybody in there? A couple of times, no answer whatsoever. So I figured I'll just throw the grenade in the building and let it go, which I did. The only thing I couldn't tell was that there was some furniture or something on the inside in front of the window, so that the grenade hit whatever they had in front of the window and bounced right back out at me. And I made myself as flat as possible, and good Lord watching over me again, it apparently just mushroomed out, because I could hear the shrapnel, you know, all this sort of stuff. But I think almost more dangerous than the grenade, the people in headquarters heard this explosion, and they all come running out ready to shoot somebody or something. And and of course, these are not the fellas that are up on the front lines. Now this sort of thing doesn't happen very often back at headquarters. And I let them know it was me. What other sorts of things are you interested in?
Okay. You're doing great. You really are doing great. Where were you taken prisoner?
I was taken prisoner more towards the end of the war. Not all that far. We were in Germany. Not all that far. I don't know how many kilometers from Würzburg we were. But we made a mistake. Not we, Snuffy Smith, which was our major. We didn't call him out to his face, but he came on the radio, take one more town. I told the fellows, I said, this is a mistake, it's getting dark, we don't have any information on what's there, anything. It's a bad deal. Went into the town, and it was empty, there was no resistance whatsoever. And we deployed our tanks and so forth on the one road that was coming into the town, put out the guards and so forth. Another one of the sergeants and I found a ham, and we had some food, about the first decent food we'd had in many, many days, because we'd been rolling day and night for maybe 5 days and nights, just rolling, just going.
Where were you started? Where was the 5 days and nights? Do you have any idea from where that was? Okay.
No, I don't. I'd have to look at the map.
Were y'all doing the spearhead?
Yes.
Okay.
Right or not, I don't know, but I always kind of figured being in the first platoon, the first rifle squad, that meant you were first. I mean, it seemed like we were always at our nose out there. But that turned out to be a big mistake, because very shortly a convoy started coming in on this road where we had set up guns and so forth, tank. We let it come in as far as we dared, and then we opened fire on it. And I guess we massacred, I don't know how many troops that were in trucks, infantrymen more or less like we were, I guess. The back end of the convoy got away. And of course, it's obvious what they did. They told people back and back that there were Americans in this town. Well, I fell asleep in the house that we had got our people in. And some of the other fellows were just so totally exhausted that we figured we could take some shut-eye while the guards were, the fellows we had posted out were watching them until they woke us up. Well, what woke me up was the tank that was outside our building. And what woke me up was almost simultaneously the engine turning over and the hatch closing. And he's gone. The normal procedure is mount up. And that takes you just a matter of seconds for everybody to be in the back of that tank and you're all gone. But this boy, one of the 43rd Tank Battalion, left us. And pretty soon, they must have known that Tiger tanks were coming, which were no match for Tiger tank. Tiger tanks came, and one of those was right outside my building. And they started shooting through the doors into the house, because there's a dead German soldier right across the threshold where he come into this house. And I thought, oh Lord, this is going to be it. They're going to retaliate for killing all of these Germans in the convoy and killing the fellow that was outside and so forth. And I could speak a little German because I had taken German in high school, contrary to the wishes of my parents, who could speak fluent French. My mother had been a French teacher. They weren't French, but she could speak French fluently, and insisted that everything had to be grammatically correct. And I couldn't hack that. My father, being a teacher in the high school that I was attending, the French teacher felt that I would be the ideal one to get it in front of the class and show everybody else how to roll their eyes and do all of this sort of stuff. And I threw in the towel. I said, no way. But to get your diploma, you had to have a foreign language. So I figured German would be probably an easier one to learn, which it is, of course. So I took German, and this is one of the many instances when knowing a little German, it helped a great deal, because I talked to the soldiers outside that, that not to shoot, that we were coming out with our hands up and so forth. So I'm not knowing whether they'd pay much attention to this anyway, but at least we tried. We went out, and they hadn't removed the guy that was dead out there. He's still there. We had to step over him to go out. And I guess I can't understand it, because we were very close on our squad, I mean, with one another. And apparently this fellow was just, to them, it was another casualty. But anyway, I had on German ski trooper boots, black ski trooper boots. And the reason I had those on was because I had 7.5 size shoe. And the quartermaster in combat areas, I think, only stocked from about 10 up. So the only way I could replace my worn out shoes was to get them off of German, which I had done. I was wearing tanker bib overalls. I had a shorty coat on. I had my rifle on my back. I had a pistol, an Italian pistol on my side, and I had a Thompson submachine gun in my arms. And of course they, I assume, had never seen any kind of a weird operation or character like this. They didn't know what I was. I could speak German, and they thought this had to be something special that was coming in. They had to find out what it was. So they whisked me away to field headquarters, their field headquarters. The lady in the house cooked a very delicious pork dinner, and they had me eat pork with them, and wine, and black bread. And so, of course, this is all trying to make, buddy kind of stuff to tell them what was going on. And I joked with them, about basketball, baseball, football, things like this, and but absolutely nothing that related to the military. And I guess they figured they had maybe softened me up enough that I was ready for the next stage of interrogation. And the only car I saw like this while I was over there is a 4-door convertible, like you've seen pictures of Hitler riding in. That darn thing pulled up outside the building we were in. Well, let me back up just a tiny bit to show you some of the dumb things I think they do. I was sitting on what I would call a deacon's bench, one end of it. Officer came in with a gun similar to our carbine, small rifle, I think. And he sat down on the other end of the deacon's bench and put the rifle between us, and then pretended to go to sleep to see if I'd grab the gun. Well, you know, it's okay to be dumb, but you don't want to be stupid. And so I just sat there more or less at attention, looking straight ahead, glance over every once in a while, see what he's doing. And I guess he finally figured I wasn't going to take the bait, so he reached over and got the gun and went back out again. But then shortly after that is when this car showed up with a fellow sitting on the top, folded down and back with a big dang machine gun. And they told me to get in the front seat with the driver, beside the driver, which I did. He had that doggone muzzle of that machine gun about that far from the back of my head. We take off. Boom, boom, boom. I figured every doggone hole this driver hits is going to blow my head off. But it didn't. It took me to Würzburg, to Gestapo headquarters. And just like you see on TV, kind of a short, porky guy, brown uniform, balding, sitting at this desk, pretty good sized desk, in what was really, looked like, to me, it looked like a pillbox. Big cement structure. Steel doors on it. And he started asking, shouting all kinds of questions to me, and I was standing at attention, and I'd salute and give him my name, rank, and serial number over and over and over. And he got redder and redder and obviously more irritated. And he finally told the guard at the door, take him out, get rid of him, in German. And I figured, you know, the way I interpreted that was that they were going to take me out and shoot me because I was worthless. But that wasn't the case. They took me to an enclosure below a large church where the rest of my squad were being held. And from there, we marched back into Germany. And the first night, we were holed up in a barn. Had 3 guards. We had a regular Army guard. We had an older guard that had been assigned to the Air Force in some ground capacity and had been pushed into guard service, and an SS guard. There's a meat market across the street from the barn. And the fellow came over, and he had been in the United States for a number of years, I guess to make enough money to go back to Germany and start his own butcher shop. And he made it known that he was kind of sympathetic to our situation. So I figured we could probably count on him to help a little bit. And the only fellow we would have to kill would be the SS guard, because the older fellow had shown me a little black box, felt-lined box, with a beautiful black wood crucifix in it, encased with silver corners and so forth. We had talked a little bit. He was a very nice elderly gentleman. And the regular Army fellow, I figured when he realizes he's overwhelmed, overpowered, he wouldn't put up any resistance. We could easily, a couple of fellows could easily have taken care of each of the 2 guards. The rest of us could overpower and kill the SS guy. But you can't do anything like this unless everybody is of a common mind and working together, because if you don't have that, the wrong people start getting killed. And all of my men at this point were repos, replacements. I'd lost all of my regular squads that I'd gone overseas with.
Did you lose them all at one?
Pardon?
Did you lose most of them at one place?
Yes, I guess I ought to back up to that after I do.
Okay.
Some of these things I don't like to talk about.
But they were
But-
replacements.
Yes, they were replacements, and they didn't have Jerry Grigg train them. They basically went through a quick basic training, and they were sent over to warm bodies to fill vacancies. So you didn't have the control or the cooperation response from these fellows that you had from the fellows that had been trained and gone overseas together. So I figured, well, I'll just have to bide my time, and when I can do it either with somebody that wants to go with me or by myself, I'll do it. But I'll back up to most unpleasant time, Steinwald Forest. We were told, I was told, no problem, it's going to be a snap. We're going up to replace some units of the Rainbow Division. And we mounted up, and the platoon lieutenant got in the skate mount with me. I always rode in the skate mount with a 50 caliber. He squeezed himself up in there with me, and deliberately released the skate mount lock, clipping his left thumb. Medic, medic! Took off, got out, went back. The records have it, as I understand, that when he got back to the headquarters, he said he cut his thumb, the door slammed on it, which they had a tendency to do. If you're just like a refrigerator door, if it isn't leveled up right, it'll swing one way or the other. Well, these doors would slam on you if you weren't careful. But he told them he'd cut his finger on the door, the half-track door that slammed on his thumb. And I have always speculated that he knew what we were going into, and he didn't want to be part of it. Frankly, I didn't like him anyway. He's gone now. I probably shouldn't say bad things about him, but that's just the way I feel. Incident back in England. Back up some more. We would get a pass to go into one of the little towns, which was nice because you could go in and have some different kind of food. You had to be back at the truck at a certain time to go back to camp. And I got back early, which I just have a habit of trying to do, be early. I'm in the truck, and it's dark. You can't see your hand in front of your face because absolutely no lights in England and so forth. Everything is total blackout. Plus, it just happened to be an extremely dark night. And somebody outside the truck said, "What time is it?" And if you don't mind, I'll use some Army words here, which was a very common thing to say when you didn't know something. I said, "Beats the shit out of me." And the voice at the back of the truck replied, "Soldier, you're speaking to an officer." Well, this was my lieutenant. Totally unrealistic. He had what I refer to as a fat head. But anyway, that's just one of many reasons why we didn't like him. But we, back to the time that after he got out of the half-track, we took off. And we went up to a point, what we call the kind of the jumping off point, dismounted. It's still dark. We had put on sheets. Took a sheet, cut a hole in it, put our head through it, come over our body as camouflage. Had pieces of, I guess, more sheeting or pillowcasing over our hats to make it look white like the snow. Going along, we're up front. And I hear this voice, "Hello?" Hell, it's a damn German outpost. And I don't know what the fellow up the front's reply was, whatever it was. But anyway, they, of course, this was a signal to them that they're coming. And we got strung out across this flat field. And my squad and I wasn't too far from the road on the far end. All hell breaks out. We're on this doggone field that's about as flat as a gym floor. Woods over here, and they're all dug in the woods with tanks and machine guns, everything. Well, it was starting to get first light. You're all down flat on your face in the snow. You got these damn sheets over you, so you can't maneuver with something like that on you much. They would see a man move, and they'd home in on him until he stopped moving. I had seen when it started to get bad, the radio man jump into a shell hole, and he had dropped a piece of the radio. And as I remember, I crawled over to get the piece of the radio, and I was going to try to give it back to him so he could call for some artillery fire to something. But the damn radio, he didn't drop it. It had been shot off his back. There was a big hole in it when I got to it. Crawled back to where the men were. And these are the things you just can't understand. One of my men beside me, young Mormon boy, when we're in our room, barn, wherever we're holed up, playing cards, drinking, whatever, he was always over in the corner with his Bible, reading, praying. Took a bullet right beside me, right in the head. And looked up, Sarge, what should I do now? What are you going to tell a man that you know is going to die in about a couple seconds? I told him, lay still, the medics are coming. Which, of course, they weren't. But somehow, from that time until shortly after noon, I was able to inch, and I mean inch. I just moved just a tiny bit at a time, hoping they wouldn't see me move. I got over to the ditch by the road. Nobody was following. Nobody wanted to come. They all want to just freeze and stay there. Got to the ditch. I figured I could crawl faster, which I did. After a point, I decided, well, I ought to be out of the small arms and machine gun fire. They aren't going to waste a mortar on me. I stuck my head up. Fellow laying out in the snow, left leg pretty badly shot up. So I crawled out to him, got him on my back, stood up, started to walk back with him on my back. And the bullets started picking the snow up right between my legs. Apparently, a machine gunner must have had me right dead on his sights, but the bullets were basically spent. They just couldn't quite reach me, thank God. Got the man back to where an officer and some other men were. They took the man from me. The officer said, I'm going to put you in for Silver Star. The hell you are. What do you mean? What are you doing for the guys out there?
I said, what are you going to give them? I don't want it, he told me. And I took on. But that was the worst of the worst. I lost my entire squad. My bazooka team, I think as a result probably of political pull or something, twins. They managed to be assigned together the same combat outfit. Alan and Bob Mansell, they were closer than a brother. Alan got shot right beside his brother. And that's the way it went that day. Went back to the outfit. I was given all new replacements. And these are fellows that had just been in the service long enough to go through basic training, shipped overseas to be replaced wherever they were needed. One of the fellows had just finished showing me pictures of his wife, a lovely lady, young lady, and his little daughter. Runner came down from the headquarters and said, Captain Fox wants to get everybody out, line them up, bring them down for an indoctrination. I just gotten them all outside, all lined up, and I was about ready to march them down. And one of the half-track drivers, Stanislaus Polkowski, came sauntering by. He wore his clothes like he had just gotten them out of a Goodwill box. His grease gun, which is a .45 caliber machine gun the drivers had, on his back, bolt back and a cover down. As he goes wiggling by, his jacket caught on the cover. Lifted the cover. Of course, the bolt slams forward. .45 caliber slug went in that man's body right there, right up through his neck and out above his left eye. He hadn't fired a gun in combat. He hadn't even been indoctrinated into the outfit. Died. So-called friendly fire, I guess. Of course, there was a court-martial, and nothing was ever done because he didn't do it deliberately. He was careless. He was just a slob. So I got another replacement to replace the replacement. But back to getting captured. The Germans would march us about 10, 12 miles or so every day. I never got any, none of us ever got anything to eat other than the bread that the military had thrown away. It was moldy and partially eaten in some cases. They would take iron kettles that they had been doing their laundry, or the farm people wherever we were billeted had just finished their laundry. They just dumped the water out, the wash water out, put more water in, and they put rotten potatoes in it and cook the rotten potatoes, make potato soup, so-called. Very sweet. I guess when the potatoes freeze, that's what happens. Either that, or they'd throw in the water dried stuff that looked like a weed, some kind of a dried weed, and it was supposed to be tea. Turned the water brackish color, but it tasted kind of bitterish and lousy. That's the only thing they ever gave us. You have a Kleenex or something? One of the things, well, some of the things we did in prison camp, to me,
Where was the prison camp?
I was never in a prison camp, a stalag.
Oh.
They marched us every day, every single day. You've heard of forced marches.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. This, I guess, would be a forced march. And when we would stop and want to be held over in one of these barns or whatever they would house us in overnight, the first thing was to look for something to eat. One case, there was a big machine, had a big wide leather belt on it, and we figured it out. It was to make rolled oats. There was a little grain in the hopper and a little bit left over. We pulled on got a hold of the belt, we pulled on it, and we're getting like oatmeal. Of course, the guard came along and read the riot act in German and took the belt away from us, just took it off the machine, went away with the belt. Well, that meant we didn't have the belt to turn the wheel, but we could turn the wheel. So a bunch of the fellows got on the wheel, and we found that by beating on the barn, grain would trickle out of a crack down at the bottom. So we catch the grain in our hands, put it in the hopper, and the fellows turn the wheel, and we made ourselves oatmeal. And by this time, you had gotten old cans that you'd found along the road or in one of the yards or something, and you hide them in your coat. You used the cans, got some water, and made us some oatmeal. Not very much, but it was something. One barn we stayed in, the people, it was quite a barn. Had a brick stairway going down, door at the bottom, and as soon as the guard went by, I went down and opened the door and went in. And there was a pile of potatoes in there, so I'm stuffing my jacket with potatoes to take out to the fellas. And about that time, the guard comes by again. He sees the door's ajar. So he hollers for the guard, or for the lieutenant, whatever his rank he was. And they came down into the area. And I dove behind the pile of potatoes. And they have it's like a flashlight. It's like a little magneto. They squeeze it, and it makes a flashlight. So the officer had one of these, and he's going like this, looking all around. Didn't see me. Light went right over the top of me. Didn't look behind the potato pile. They went back out. Guard went out with him, of course. And they had a chain that they pushed through the door from the outside, and it had like what I would call a T-link. And they pushed that on and drew it up, and then put a link of the chain over a staple in the door casing, and then put a lock on it. Their problem was solved. But what they didn't know, there was somebody in there, me. And of course, one of my buddies is up the top, looking around. When the guards are gone, he's motioning like this. And what I did, I pulled on the chain, and I had just enough slack so I could take the T-link, push it through the hole, and go out. Well, I didn't bother relocking the door. I just took off and spread the potatoes out with the fellas. Guard came by again and sees the door ajar. He screams for the officer again. They came back. He's holding the chain in his hand, and he's looking. I don't think it ever entered their head that there was still somebody in there. They just couldn't understand how we had unlocked that door. One of the other times in a barn, in a corner of the barn was a chicken coop, chicken house, whatever you want to call it. You had a regular door to get into it from the outside of the barn. You had a little guillotine door, a little door about that big on the outside of the barn that they would raise to let the chickens in and out. Had a peg to hold it up. And they had one of those on the inside of the barn. Well, at night, they'd lower the old guillotine doors, count their chickens, make sure they're all in there. Lock the other door with a big old lock. So what one of my buddies and I did, we went, laid in the straw on the barn floor beside the inside guillotine door. And about 1:30, 2 o'clock, whatever it was in the morning, I had picked up a stick, and you could lift the guillotine door, put my arm in there with a stick, and I started just flailing it around. And pretty soon you could hear the chick, they get down off the roost and start wandering around. As soon as that foot was in my hand, goodbye chicken. We jerked that thing out of there, wrung its neck, tore the feathers and skin off, and ate it raw. I mean, no other way you could eat it. They aren't going to let you go to the kitchen and use the stove. But other than that, that was about the only food that we ever got. And finally, the group went from about 12 of us to about over 500 American prisoners. We were all being marched to the rear. And one night it was raining. Oh, it was raining. Well, kind of like we had here the other evening. Dark, very, very dark out. And you had kind of like a dike going around this town. They had a guard up on this dike, and there was a guard on the back door where you went out. They had a slit trench where you went to the bathroom. Well, when it got really bad, really raining, terrible, miserable, the guard on this dike thing went over under a tree, which made him just that much farther away. The guard that was outside counting those that went out and those that went in and so forth went on the inside. And of course, a whole bunch of people milling around on the inside, and neither one of them were able to see well or count well. So a fellow that had been in the air, a tail gunner in a B-17, little fella, and I decided this is the time. So we went out, and after we did what we had to do, we laid down and crawled into town. Because I figured if they're going to look for us, they're going to look for us going out of town. They won't look for us crawling into town. Well, then of course the question is, where the dickens are you going to hide? And there was a church there. Looked inside the church. There's no place to hide inside the church. Looked in back of the church, and there was a little shed. Had all kinds of broken pews and other things in there. We decided, well, if we're going to hide someplace, this is probably it. And I noticed there was a hole in the wall up about 5 feet. I boosted him up. I said, take a look, see if there's a room for us we can hide in there. And I boosted him up. Went in. He said, yep, this is it. Well, then the question is, how am I going to get in there? I leaned the board up against the wall so I could stand on that. He took my hands and started pulling me in. Well, that was worked fine up to a point. I had scrounged kind of a tattered blanket, and I had it wrapped around my middle with my coat over it. Well, it was like a cork.
he got my head, my shoulders in, and the rest of me's hanging out the darn hole. Oh, Lord. Well, he reached in and was able to pull a blanket out, pull it inside with him. But every time I would move, a little piece of mortar would fall down on these, and it sounded like somebody was taking a sledgehammer and beating on the side of the building. Well, I got up in there, and no sooner had I gotten up in there than they apparently had discovered that people had escaped, either the two of us or some officers. The officers were kept in a different part of the area. The guards would go in, you could hear them with these little magneto flashlights shining around. And again, this hello bit. I mean, in a very German accent, we're saying hello, and they expected you to answer. Well, obviously nobody answered. And they slammed the doors. Then they came around to the back. I thought, uh-oh. And they ripped open the door to the shed. They shined the light around and pulled a few boards and things over and left. Didn't see the hole. We stayed there for, at least one night or more until they marched out all of the other American prisoners. Went on. Then we left at night and started crawling back towards the American lines, where we knew the Americans were advancing. The first night, I don't think we had gotten maybe half a mile outside that town. We were coming to a rise and walking on a little path right beside the woods. I heard German voices. The damn German patrol coming. And they were on us just like that. And we just fell down in the tall grass and weeds beside the path. You get the woods here, this tall grass in the area maybe no more than 20 feet wide, and the path. And I'd swear that my heart was beating like a bass drum, and these guys are going to hear it. But they're laughing and smoking and went on by. Well, we figured we better hole up someplace. Went up over the rise, and there's a big barn. I mean, it's a big barn. A little building next to it with lights on in it. I figured that must be a chicken coop, maybe running lights at night or something for the chickens or whatever. Couldn't see a soul around. Not a soul. Not a sound. The doors to the barn, the big doors, were open a couple feet. I figured, okay, we'll sneak in there. And I guess about the only thing we can do is hide in there someplace. I had just gotten inside the door and I stepped on something. Damn it! Watch where you're walking! A whole bunch of American prisoners, and apparently the guards had just gone back to this other building and were playing cards. They really weren't guarding them. Well, I could see my eyes were getting adjusted to the semi-darkness, and I saw the ladder going up. I said, I'm afraid to leave, go someplace else, because the guards might come back. He may have just gone to the bathroom or something. So we climbed up the ladder, went way the hell up underneath the roof, these tile roofs, burrowed down in the straw. The whole darn thing was filled with straw. Burrowed down in there, which was a gamble because in the morning when they count heads, if anybody's missing, one of the things they do, they probe the straw with their bayonets and shoot into the straw. They go nuts. Well, fortunately, the next morning, they had everybody out. Nobody had escaped. And they marched on. We stayed there for, I guess, a couple days. And the boy with me
He hadn't eaten. He looked like he was skin and bones. He'd been a prisoner for 14 months. And he said, I got to get some food. I said, well, I'm going to stay here. He said, I'm going to get some food. And you could lift those tiles up and kind of peek out. And he saw a farmhouse, not the one that was close to the barn, but one that was across a field, little farmhouse. And he crouched down and ran over there. Went in the damn farmhouse. Nobody there, but there's a loaf of bread on the table. Of course, the loaf of bread disappeared real fast, and he came back, and nobody saw him. I tell you, the good Lord was watching after him and me. It's amazing. But after a period of days in the barn, lifted the tiles, because we heard vehicles, didn't know whether it was German, American, or what it was. But we saw American air recognition panels on this convoy that was going forward. We figured it was the Americans. But I was afraid to go out because we were so filthy by then. I mean, I had a German fur hat on. I had the German boots on. My clothes were totally filthy. Because, see, we all the time we were in the prison, you never washed, you were terrible. And I was afraid they would think we were Germans and they might shoot us. So we waited until the convoy was long gone, walked out to the highway, walked again the direction that the convoy had come from, thinking, that's where American Allied troops have got to be. Came to this little house the side of the road. It was a shop, really. Had a whole bunch of bicycles in it. And we thought, oh, we've got it made now. We're going to be able to take a bike and ride back in style. Each got a bike out, got on the road. I don't think we rode those bikes 500 feet. These different muscles apparently have to be used. Our legs cramped up so bad, we couldn't make the darn bicycle go another foot, so we threw them in the ditch and started walking. And ultimately we reached what turned out to be an engineering unit, a support unit. And they said, we're sorry, there are no provisions for aiding, returning, whatever, escaped American personnel. He said, the only thing I can tell you is that, you know where Paris is. You ever been to Paris? I said, yeah, I've been to Paris. He said, well, if you hitchhike on fuel trucks, whatever, head for Paris. And he told us where a place was that they called the barn. He said, they'll process you, get you fresh clothing, clean you up, so forth. So we would flag down.
Did they feed you?
Yes, yes. Only dang sea rations. It wasn't anything very much. But they got us our first ride. And when that truck would have to stop, they would get us another ride on a fuel truck filled with gas cans on the back, and we'd ride on them, go through these little towns, and the people thought we were Germans. They would wave to us and talk to us in German. Got to Paris. I thought, oh, no. What are we going to do now? Don't have any papers. We have our dog tags. We look a mess. MPs are going to think we're AWOL, and they're going to really give us a bad time. In general, a lot of us that were combat soldiers didn't exactly have any love affair with MPs, because it just seemed like they were always looking for a chance, an opportunity to hassle us. Well, I said, Rabbit, and this little fellow who was with me, they called him, his nickname was Rabbit. I won't explain why. I said, having been in Paris, I know where the club is where we can get free coffee and donuts. I said, we'll go in the back way, and we won't have to go through the MPs. I'd always, whenever I go in a building, I always look for an alternate entrance and exit in case I got to get out in a hurry. That's how I knew where the back door was and so forth. But anyway, went in the back door, and I guess the young ladies waiting on the tables in the area where we went were all Polish. Real nice young ladies. And they started, I guess they suspected that we weren't American because of the way we looked and everything. And the clothes I had on, what have you. And they started, I guess, asking us questions in Polish. Of course, I couldn't understand what the heck they were going to say. And then I made another one of my stupid mistakes. I said, well, heck, I'm sure they can talk German. So I spoke to them in German and told them what I wanted. And of course, that did it. Right away, we are Germans. And they started screaming and hollering and all this sort of stuff. And people started descending upon us. And fortunately, in a table near us, there were 2 Army nurses. And I guess they had heard the 2 of us talking in English and so forth and discussing our our problems and what have you. And they came over and, you might say, rescued us and showed us where this barn, so-called barn was, where we could go and get cleaned up and deloused, and because we were in really pretty sad shape.
What was the length of time between the time you were captured and this time we're talking about?
I escaped after being captured for, it was over a month, and then we were working our way back for another week at least. So.
Now, what was the man's name that was with you?
Well, his nickname was Rabbit. He lived in Florida someplace, and another thing, I should have gotten his name and address and followed him up. We were both taken to the barn for treatment, so forth and so on. I stayed there and got feeling better and ate and whatnot. And he went out and pretty near killed himself, enjoying himself. But we never saw each other after that. Lieutenant at this facility told me, he said, Sergeant, if you want to stick around for a while, see the sights, go do whatever you want. He said, report back in here periodically and I'll make sure you got enough money to do whatever you want to do. Because I wanted to go home. I didn't want to see any more sights. In fact, the engineering unit that I first met after I escaped, all they had on their mind, they wanted souvenirs. And they said, you guys know how to do it? Show us how to go get some souvenirs. I didn't want to go get any souvenirs. I want to go home. So we went to Paris. And after that, they took us to Camp Lucky Strike, where the Liberty ships were waiting to take us back.
What date are we talking about?
Pardon?
What dates? Do you know about the dates? When you
Probably
came home?
June, maybe, something like that, around in there.
40.
Right at the end of the war, not too far. See, I had no idea when the war was going to be over, how things were going. You just fight. You're given orders take this town, take that town. You don't stop to think, well, I only got 5 more and I'm through. You just keep going until you can't go anymore. But they had these great big galvanized trash cans at the dock filled with eggnog, because it was powdered milk and powdered stuff. Oh, did that stuff taste good. Oh, delicious. I dip your canteen cup in that thing and drink it. Oh, I think I had about 3 cups full. Probably lucky I didn't blow up. Got on the Liberty ship, went down in the hole, and they had the dang hole lined with rows of mattresses. So you're sleeping on the bottom of the ship. All of our food was boiled food because of our internal problems and so forth. Then the merchant marine found out who we were and that we were hungry. So they commandeered some bologna from their kitchen facility, and they'd slice it about a half an inch thick. 2 slices of bread, 50 cents a sandwich. And of course, you hadn't had this sort of stuff, some fellas, for years. You just wolf it down. And it came up just as fast as it went down. To this day, I cannot eat bologna, salami, and things like that. It just the odor, I just can't handle it. One evening, after we'd been sailing for quite some time, the commodore of this convoy, I don't know whether it was his orders or the orders he received, but we were going way up north to come back to the United States. And we reached a point, I'd heard about this, but I didn't know how serious it could be. The compasses went haywire. And everybody is having problems. So they sounded boat stations. And I'm up on deck hanging onto that old rusty painted railing. Out of the fog is thick. About 20 feet away from me is the bow of a ship coming right at me. Well, I guess they probably saw us about the same we saw them. And that ship is, they got the thing in full astern. Ours was full astern and left the right rudder, I don't know what. But we missed a collision by, I imagine, just a few feet. Got back to the came into the Brooklyn Navy base. Unloaded us, put us on this pier that is compartmented with like little warehouses all along this pier. Put us in this room, said, wait, buses will be here shortly. Well, I don't wait. I decide I'm going to explore this place. So I looked outside. There aren't any guards or anything, so heck, I go out. I start going up the pier, checking all of the different little warehouse rooms. Finally, I found one. It's loaded with, look in there, it's loaded with all these boxes, cases of stuff. 3-2 beer. I'll remember that. I go down a few more, and there's one with a whole bunch of fork trucks in it. I get on a forklift truck, figure out how to get the thing going, go out, go down to where the beer was, loaded the thing up with as much beer as I could get on it, and went back to where all the fellas were. We had party while we waited for the bus. And Because time went rather rapidly, and we didn't realize what time it was after a while anyway, so it didn't matter. They poured us onto the bus, and I finally wound up in Lake Placid for hospitalization and exams and this and that and everything, and then they finally gave you if you were physically okay, they gave you 2 weeks furlough to go home. And I, like many of them, didn't have enough points to be eligible for discharge, so we came back to Lake Placid for more tests, more exams, interrogation, this, that, the other thing, and you got to reassign. They wanted to reassign me to Camp Campbell, Kentucky, as a drill sergeant to train new recruits. And I told them, no way. I said, I've seen too many people die. I said, I don't want to be a part of training more people to go over and die. And so after more tests and so forth, they sent me to Camp Lee, Virginia. I didn't have to do anything. Get up in the morning, go to breakfast, go swimming, go to a movie. After, I don't know how many days of this or how long it was, I'm going stir crazy. Nothing to do. I didn't have enough money, so I couldn't go into town. I'm just there, either going to movies, walking, swimming. Wasn't anything. I going nuts. So I expect this is what they expected. I said, I got to get out of here. Send me someplace where I can do something. Just about anything. Except I don't want to go to Camp Campbell. It's okay. So they sent me to Camp Kilmer, New Jersey. And I was supposed to report to a Major Plapp. I had no idea what I was going to be doing or who Major Plapp was, what he did. But to me, a major is a reasonably high-ranking officer, deserves a lot of respect and so forth. And I was told what building and everything I had to go to. Reported to the building. There's a secretary sitting there at this desk, whack, outside the office, and I told her I am supposed to report to Major Plapp, Sergeant Brock. He said, oh yes, he's waiting for you. Go on in. Opened the door and went in, and here's this officer sitting at a desk. This is normal sized desk. I went up to the front of the desk, snapped to attention, saluted, told him, Sergeant Brock, Richard Arthur, Sergeant 3293-4357, reporting for duty, sir, and held my salute. He just looked at me. I guess nobody had ever saluted him or reported to him like that before. And I found out that he had been a teacher, and somehow or other he got a commission, and he's been at a desk his entire Army career during the war. Well, after stammering around a little bit, he sit down. Never returned my salute. I guess he didn't know you're supposed to. And he said, well, I'm going to put you in charge of a group of WACs to do some statistical work on the arrivals and departures of men from overseas. Fine. Assigned these WACs to me to do this very elementary math of adding how many were coming in and then subtracting that number from the guys that were going here to here. I mean, a half a person could have done it in a couple of hours. And again, I'm getting bored. I haven't got anything to do, really. I mean, just telling these gals what to do and just checking the numbers once in a while. It wasn't much. He called me in and he said, incidentally, if you ever want to use my Jeep, he said it's outside there. If my Jeep's gone, my car will be, my keys are always right, you can take my car. I mean, they didn't know what to do with me, apparently. And he said, if you don't mind, every once in a while, maybe you could take my wife shopping. My son will go with you, you little boy. And so every once in a while, he'd call. He said, mind going in, picking up my wife and take her shopping? I'd go in New Brunswick, pick his wife up at the officers' quarters and go shopping. And finally, I got enough points so that I could be discharged. They offered me all sorts of promotions to try to keep me in. And of course, I wanted to go home. And so I got my discharge and went home. But all of my time in service, I found out too late that I had made one basic mistake. Not knowing the government system or the military system. A paper trail is extremely important. I never went on sick call. If you got cut, you got hurt, you took care of yourself, or your buddies would help take care of you. You didn't go to sick call or hospital or anything like that. The only time you did that was if it were life-threatening or debilitating and you couldn't help it. So I had no medical records of anything. And anybody that's been a prisoner of war, especially under the circumstances that I was, you've got extreme dysentery and internal problems and so forth. None of that was in my records. I went to my family physician because about mid-afternoon every day I was starting to fall asleep. I just couldn't stay awake. And he determined that I was passing what I think he referred to as 4+ blood. I was bleeding rather severely internally. And it was because I had a mimic infestation and colitis as a result of the goodies that I ate in prison camp. He said, you shouldn't be seeing me. You should go to the VA. Well, I didn't know anything about going to the VA, things like this. He said, go to Buffalo, the VA office, and gave me the address. And he said, they will help you. So I said, well, fine. Went into the VA, introduced myself, and told them what the problem was. The doctor said, I'm sorry, you'll have to wait till next Friday. We'll have your military records, and then we'll be able to talk. Fine. Came back next Friday. I'm sorry, Mr. Brock, we can't help you. A quote. This is bad. I hope it's not offensive. He said, if you were a New York Jew, you would have all of this on your record. That irritated me to no end. Of course, they wouldn't dare say things like that today, obviously. But I figured, this is the VA that supposedly is going to help veterans? I don't want anybody to mention that word VA to me ever again. And there was roughly 20 years that's the way it was. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to have any association whatsoever with any military organization, any VA, whatever. And then it just so happened that they were having a prisoner of war reunion in Lynchburg, Virginia, where I was living. And I decided to go to it, and there was a PR person from the Salem Medical Center there. And I took the opportunity to tell her exactly what I thought about the VA and so forth and so on. And after I was through with my little soapbox
oration, why, she said, tomorrow morning, you're going to be at my office at the VA. I want you to be there at 8 o'clock. Do you understand? Real nice young lady, but I mean, she was very, very, I guess, upset at what I had said so far. I said, okay, one more time. And I went in, and she had my card all printed up and ready for me, and my VA ID card for medical service. And from that day until, well, I guess about a year ago this past June, I couldn't say enough good about the medical services of the Veterans Administration relative to helping fellas and ladies. A year ago this past June, they had what they called a muster for all former prisoners of war. The intent of this was to explain the benefits that are available and how to get these, so forth and so on. Now, I had to go through a protocol exam to determine what my problems were, and filled out a form, and this was an addendum to that form. The exam was a joke. It was, in fact, it was kind of disgusting to me because it wasn't done very professionally. And the papers went down to the Veterans Administration, the paper end of it, which is a separate entity from the medical end of it. And there's a gentleman down there, and I use the term loosely, Umlauf, who is the adjudicator to determine whether you are eligible for this, eligible for that. And with a name like that, I figure he's probably the son of one of the guys that was shooting at me over there. But that is over a year and a half ago now, and they're still messing with my paperwork. They've made statements in writing to me that they weren't sure that I was ever a prisoner of war. So I got them copies of the letters from the Adjutant General, the Secretary of the Army, the Adjutant General awarding me the POW medal, and so forth. I shouldn't have to prove that. They should have that in their dang records. They just don't want to bother. But anyway, that's another story. Because I'm quite bitter about the inequitable treatment of veterans coast to coast. Because I've talked to some when I was out in Seattle better than a year ago, and they said, oh, if you were out here, we could do this, we could do that. Totally different attitude put together. But be that as it may. There are a lot of other things that have happened. We did things like when we went on patrol one time. Came upon a schoolhouse, big blackboard in it. Oh, this blackboard, it's empty. We got to put something on that blackboard. So I drew Kilroy for him, put that on. Kilroy was here, made a few other statements, and went on with our patrol. Did silly things like that. I feel extremely important to be able to laugh. Sometimes you can't. But if possible, you need to try to see the light side of life to overshadow the very dark side. What else would you like to hear about?
Looking back over, I think you've already told me the moments that stand out in your mind. That would be the Steinem Woods and the time that you were. Are there any other times that really stand out in your mind? Or have you kind of covered most of that? You want to look at that?
I was going to say there's so many things, little things that have happened. Some of them you feel terrible about. For example, we had pulled back to get more ammunition and so forth, just off the front a little bit, and heard a shot come from a barn. One of our fellows came limping on him. Shot! I'm shot! Well, you immediately assume that there was somebody in that barn that had shot him. So a bunch of the fellows went in. Bang, 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 bang. There was a German soldier hiding in one of the stalls. Young boy, just like we were. No gun. No knife. Nothing. The guy had tripped and shot himself in the foot. We killed the boy for nothing. That things like that happen. They shouldn't happen. You have to ask yourself over and over, is there anything I could have done differently to save the lives of my fellows? Before some of them died, did they think I abandoned them? Did they think that I should have done something more? It's very worrisome. Having, you might say, a guilt complex that you should have done something different, even though you don't know what it could have possibly been. It's a terrible feeling, having someone you love die in your arms. You never forget. You try to forget, but you wake up out of a sound sleep, and it's just like it was yesterday. You're there. Some fellas, fortunately, maybe didn't feel quite the way I do about it. Maybe they weren't as close to some of the fellas that died as I was. But the bond you have with a man beside you, in front of you, and back of you, that may make the difference between whether you live or die, is very close. You're depending upon him. He is depending upon you. And to have a feeling that you may have let them down is a terrible feeling. I carry some of that to my grave, I guess, but I'm fortunate that I never was seriously hurt, wounded, except internally. I survived. Too many others didn't.
that can't be changed. Let's see if there's any. Oh, I had a case of dynamite on the front of my half-track. And one of the many things I didn't enjoy, we may pull into an area, dismount, dig in. That meant you had to dig your own foxhole. When the ground's frozen, you got that little stinking pickaxe, it's not exactly easy. So I thought, well, heck, I'll just take a few blocks of dynamite, unscrew the top of a couple of my hand grenades, and take the detonator and push it down in a hole down in the dynamite, and I'll blow myself a foxhole. and while everybody else knocking themselves out, I'll make mine an easy way. I couldn't get that damn dynamite to go off. I kept blowing those things with my hand grenade detonators, and it just go poof, and have a little pock mark in the frozen ground like that. After about 3 tries, okay, mount up. We take off again. One time we pulled into a town called Niederschauffelsheim. I'll never forget it because of the big long name on the signpost we came in. I got my fellas in a second story of this home. Lady downstairs. Room had a big bed in it, had a crib. Also had one of these European stoves where it's all covered with tile, oven in the front, so forth. Very, very nice, pretty things. And I had seen some ducks on my way in. And I told the fellows, roast duck would be great. So down below in the barn, I got a gunny sack, went out, got a duck, ran back to the house, ran up the stairs, in the bedroom, slammed the door behind me, got the duck. About that time, I hear footsteps running up behind me. Obviously, it's a lady from downstairs. She kept saying, "What's the matter? What's the matter?" Because she saw me running up the stairs and thought something was very wrong. So before she got the door, we threw the bag and the duck under the bed. And she's standing at the door, ask, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" What was that? What was that? I said, "Nothing, you fellas fooling around." And I had a hell of a time getting her out of that room before she found the duck. We had roast duck, and I don't know whether she probably smelled the crook and something, but I don't know whether she ever knew what it was or not. But we would go out, and they have hare over there, big rabbits, and they would be running in kind of a group. And a couple of us would lay in the snow, and when they get so that we figured they were within easy range, we'd say, "You work on that half, and I'll work on this half." And boom. And of course, once the first shot is fired, they're going every which way. We get a bunch of these rabbits, bring them back, and give the lady a couple, and she would cook the rest for us. Put potatoes and onions and black gravy, delicious. So again, that was one of the lighter, more memorable, pleasurable moments. On the ridge one time we were dug in, and the Germans had mortars where they'd fire around
In the next round, if it was coming towards you, you knew they were all just going to be progressively come closer, closer, closer. They were going away, you didn't worry about it. Well, a fella a few foxholes away from me had to relieve himself, and he'd gotten out of his foxhole, and he had all his clothes down around his ankles in the snow and so forth. Here comes the first more. Boom. Next one. Boom, coming towards him. Hey, you want to see something that I thought was funny at the time? A man trying to get back in his foxhole with his pants and everything else down around his ankles. That was something. I thought that was funny.
Did he get back?
Oh, yeah, he got back all right. A little messed up, but he got back. There are so many little anecdotes like that that.
If you were looking back, did you look back over all the things that have happened, and it made a big difference in your life that you went through? But if you look at your life, how are you different than you think you would have been if you hadn't gone through it?
Well, I had an offer for a deferment to work in an the president and owner of the company lived across the street from us in the town I lived in. And he wanted me to come to work for him in his design department. I didn't do that. I didn't figure that was the honorable thing to do. If I had stayed home, I obviously would have had considerable money in the bank. I wouldn't have had the physical problems that I've had. I wouldn't have the horrible memories and recalls of memories that I have. Being in service as I was, when I got out, I was totally emotionless. I was hardened to tragedy, if you want to put it that way. Somebody getting hurt, somebody having problems, didn't bother me. That's their problem. I didn't relate well to people in civilian life initially. However, you go in the Army, a young boy right out of high school, within a matter of anywhere from hours to a few days, you become a man. Not necessarily a good one, but you become a man awfully fast. Faster than I'm sure God intended. You were forced into making decisions and doing things that no young man the age that we were should have to do. They shouldn't be forced into making instantaneous decisions of life and death. Those are permanent decisions. You cannot change them once you make them. Fortunately, I was able to obtain good employment in
first heavy machinery design with Worthington Pump and Machinery Corporation in Buffalo. And then once I left that, kind of on a dare, to take a job in New York City, which moving from a town of 25, 30,000 to New York City is a rather radical step. But I went down, a friend of mine was a little older than I was, quite a bit older than I was, graduated in the top of his class at MIT and was vice president of a company. Called me and asked me, how about coming down for a job? First time he called, I said, he's crazy, Ray. Go to New York City? No way. Called me a couple of weeks later, have you been thinking about it? And I said, no. He said, well, come on down. I'll send you the plane tickets. It won't cost you. You'll be in a nice hotel. We can go out and have dinner together, see a few shows and stuff. If you don't like it, you've had a super weekend. Well, I went down, and the financial benefits were, to me, unbelievable. Guaranteed me a raise within 6 months. If I left the company for any reasons other than being a lousy employee, they would pay the moving costs equal distance from Buffalo to New York. So I figured, heck, this is kind of a win-win situation. So from that day on, I had been working and continued to work with companies that were involved with nuclear energy, either in the design and construction of nuclear power plants or in the design of special machinery and equipment for places like Hanford, Washington, so forth and so on. Very interesting work, very challenging work. A lot of it was for the Department of Defense. Good jobs. Good jobs. I always got along well with people. I always hit it off well with the top man. My last job, I finally got out of the designing of equipment. Well, like if you maybe remember, many years ago, you had the NS Savannah nuclear ship. I did a lot of the work on that in the design department for remote handling equipment. I finally got out of the design end of it and went in. There was an opening in the company I was working for in Lynchburg, Virginia, as office manager. An office manager in that particular company, and I imagine in most, you have all of the disciplines reporting to you that are considered overhead and are not chargeable, contract chargeable. So I had the maintenance people, I had the grounds people, I had the mail, I had stationary stockroom, I had security, I had travel, on and on. I had about up to 75 people reporting to me, plus contract people like the food services people, the security people, the janitorial people that were contract people. Interesting, challenging job. You basically had to try to make 3,000 people happy, which is next to impossible. It was a very good company, a very good and challenging job until the very, very last years where things became quite political and doing a good job wasn't enough. So that I retired early. I just wasn't worth staying for a few more years, make a few more dollars, and put up with that kind of ridiculousness. A lot of hanky-panky going on in the office that I don't condone, that sort of thing. It just wasn't the company that I had joined.
Next question.
Okay, tell me about your family. You say you have a daughter. You mentioned a daughter.
Oh, I have a very fine family.
When did you marry your wife?
As of this past Monday, which was my 52nd wedding anniversary, I have 6 children. One is married. My youngest son married, no children. My oldest son is he is just outside of Lynchburg, Virginia. My oldest son is married and has 2 boys and 1 daughter, and lives in just Midlothian, which is south of Richmond, Virginia. My youngest daughter is in this state as of now, married to a military man who is in intelligence, and they will soon. Well, by the first of the year, I guess they're going to go to Georgia, an intelligence school in Georgia. But he's been at Presidio, so forth and so on. Speaks 3 dialects of Arabic. I guess that's what it is. Like assalamu alaikum, that sort of stuff. My next, let's see, my next daughter. Yeah, my next daughter is Pam, and she has 2 children, Seamus and Maris, and her husband works, and she had worked for DuPont. It's a little harder to communicate with them or to visit. They live in Singapore right now. Just about as far as you can go. Cindy, one of my other daughters, lives just outside of Charlottesville, Virginia. Let's see. And Joanne lives in Lynchburg, and her husband is currently working in Georgia, and they very well may move down there and make that a permanent situation. And he's